This is Dan Schneider. On this Dan Schneider video interview, it is the second of my shows on an old PBS show called High Feather. A few months ago, I spoke with one of the producers. Now I have one of the former child actors, and the conversation will begin in a moment. So Cindy Carlson is the woman before you. Her name on the show as a child actress was Cindy O'Neill. And High Feather was a public television show that ran for only 10 episodes. It was filmed in, I believe, the summer of 1979 and aired starting the spring of 1980. And of all the 8 child actors, the only one that I could locate and was willing to do it, an interview, was Cindy. So welcome, Cindy. Before we get into the actual show and your participation in it, if you could just take a minute or two and just tell me a little bit about yourself then and now.
Then and now, okay. Well, currently I'm a recruiter, so I'm not in the acting world at all. I live in Connecticut, and I have 3 pretty much grown children, 18, 23, and 25. So full-time working mom. And before, as a child, as you know, I lived in New Jersey, and I did a little modeling, a little acting back in the day, and went to college instead of pursuing an acting career, and then went on to have my family, and now I'm working.
Okay.
Nothing too exciting, Dan.
Yeah. So let's just talk about the pre-High Feather. You're growing up. Did you grow up in an artistic family? Were there any other actors or anything like that?
My sister, yeah, I have an aunt that was a model, and my sister was an actress as well.
Okay. And how did you get involved? Well, let's talk what you know about the beginning or the formation of the show, and how were you involved? Were you just cold casted or you know?
No, actually, if memory serves me, I had 3 auditions because I had a manager at the time, Barbara Jarrett Management. I'm sure they're no, I would highly doubt they're still around, a long time ago. But she was an agent or manager in New York City.
Uh-huh.
And so I used to go on auditions for commercials and TV shows and such. And High Feather became available, and I interviewed, and they brought me back a couple more times. And that's the 3rd interview was with all the kids because they wanted to see how we all interacted together. So that's when I got the phone call that I got the job. I believe I was going into 7th grade, or the summer before going into 7th grade. I remember being just ecstatic and running home like a mile, just running home and screaming, "I got the job! I got the job!" And so that was really exciting. And then after that, we took off for the whole summer. We were away from our families, and that's where we filmed up in Mahopac, New York, in upstate New York.
And so did you do like Burger King commercials or things like that before the show?
My sister was the Burger King girl.
Oh,
she did a lot of Burger King commercials. Yeah, I was on a soap opera for a very short stint. It was called Search for Tomorrow.
Oh,
I had a small part in that. I did a couple of commercials, and I was an extra in a bunch of movies.
Mm-hmm. So let's just keep it on you before we go onto the show. So you said that after High Feather, did roles just dry up, or did you just lose any enthusiasm? How was the overall experience of filming the show?
Well, let's see. The overall experience, I had a blast. I had a blast. I didn't want it to end. I mean, when the summer came to an end and it was time to go home, I didn't want to go back to reality. I really enjoyed living in that world.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a lot of fun. Once I got home, I was almost like I was a mini movie star in my hometown. You know,
Mm-hmm.
people would start singing the High Feather song behind my back, and I would turn around and they'd be gone, especially the young boys back then. So I got fan mail, which I still have somewhere tucked away from kids around the country. And so for such a little small, no name show, getting all that fan mail was quite an experience. And I just can't imagine what it would be like if you were really famous, because you can see how your privacy gets a little bit intruded on. But it was a lot of fun. So as the years went on, I did audition. I did the small stint in the soap opera. I did some extra roles. I did some more modeling. But then I decided to go away to college. I mean, it's a real cutthroat world, show business, and you could go on, 20 auditions and land one small role. Competition was fierce. I had to take a bus into New York every time. I had to leave school. So my high school years were kind of fragmented. between auditions and playing volleyball and being in school plays and such, it became. I decided I just wanted to go to college instead. So, I
Mm.
mean, if I hit it big, I probably wouldn't have gone to college, if I would be honest. But that never happened. So I chose the college path instead.
How about any of your children? Have they ever wanted to go into acting, or have you dissuaded them from doing so?
My youngest, my son Michael, wanted to try it. He's a really good looking young man, and I told him he should try modeling. But where we live in Connecticut, we're about a 2 hour train ride from Manhattan, about, well, maybe like 70, 80 minutes. And so it's just not conducive. If we lived right outside of Manhattan, I'd probably encourage it, but then I'd probably, if he hit it big, I'd probably kick myself. So it's not an easy world to live in.
Now, when I spoke with Terrence Taylor a few months ago, and he was one of the producers, one of the, I guess you'd call him a junior producer, he gave a little bit of background about the show. So people can watch that for the more, I guess, technical aspects of how to put together a show. What were you told about the show when you went in for the first audition, or when your agent told you about it? Because it wasn't really like getting on, say, a network. It's not like you're going to be acting next to the Fonz, say.
Right. Honestly, when you're 13 and you say you're going to audition for a show, I knew, later on it was health and nutrition and it was funded by the state of New York. But at the time, when you're that young and such, you don't care what you're auditioning for. It just sounded like, hey, why not? And so when I got the job, I didn't really fully comprehend until a few years later, like, oh, wow, this is kind of a cheesy little kid show that's about health and nutrition. And it did end up in my own school. Like it was, I think it was sold or went to school districts, and so we watched some of the series in my school and such. So it was just something fun. So I didn't really put a label to it, like, hey, this isn't as cool as being on, as you said, Happy Days.
Yeah. One of the interesting things about the show, and I had mentioned this to Terrence, is it seemed to me, I don't know if you're familiar with a show from Canada in the mid to late '80s called Degrassi Junior High or Degrassi High. It seemed like a precursor to a lot of those kinds of shows, in that, number one, you kids were real age. You weren't 25-year-olds playing high schoolers or whatnot. So you're real age kids, but also that the kids were what would now be termed multicultural. There were 3 black kids. There were half girls, half boys. There was one Hispanic. There was one fat, tubby boy, and it seemed to make a point of being diverse. But you didn't really get the sense of what we'd call now a modern sense of political correctness. The kids seemed to interact naturally. Were you used to interacting with kids who were of different colors, or did you come from mostly a white neighborhood? And was there any problems in that sense?
No, honestly, I did come from a primarily white school, and I didn't think twice of it back then. I didn't think twice of it. I had the girl who plays Anne in the show. Her real name, I believe, is Tasha, and she and I shared a room with one of the production assistants, and I never even thought twice about color. I mean, race or anything like that. So there was no, at least not on my part. I can't.
So
I can't speak for the others, but I didn't think twice about it.
Did you actually like live in that camp with the regular kids who were attending that camp?
No, we had a hotel right outside of the camp, and so we would go home at the end of the day to the hotel, and there was. My room, I had myself and the girl who played Tasha, and one of the production assistants. Her name was Susan Garbarini. And so at the time, she seemed like she was 40 or 50 years old, but I think she was only in her early 20s. When you're 13, people that age always look a lot older. And so she kind of like watched over us, so to speak, and was our caretaker at the time. So there was the 3 of us in that room. I think the other rooms had about 3 each as well, maybe 2 kids and 1 adult. Might have been a couple of exceptions, but that's how my room was.
Now, because I first found out about the show again when on Facebook. I went to a Facebook group I'm in and asked if anyone remembered the show. Someone said High Feather, because for years I remembered the show and I couldn't remember the name of it, and no one seemed to know what it was, which seems to be something that online is sort of a meme. People remember the show but don't remember what it was called or whatnot. Did you interact heavily with people like Terrence or the people created the show, or were you basically just with a few handlers that handled the children?
I was actually very close with Alan and Judy Seeger. They were the directors. Judy, I believe, was the producer. Alan was, I think, one of two or three directors, but he was one of the lead guys. And I stayed in contact with them for many years, all through college. Alan and I wrote letters back and forth. I actually went to visit them in their Manhattan apartment at the time.
Mm.
And then Susan Garbarini and Marianne, I think her last name was Guthrie, the production assistants. I went and visited them a couple of times in their Queens home. Mm-hmm. But Alan, the director, is one person that I did stay in touch with for a long time. And then I think somewhere maybe in my late 20s or mid 20s, we lost touch. I went on to have family and life goes on. But yeah, I did. I stayed in touch. I think I was the only one of the kids that actually stayed in touch with the adults after the show for a period of time.
So talk to me about the final audition when you finally met the other seven major players, if you will, the other seven children. Did they actually have you interact scenes from some of the episodes that were written? And were the episodes, all 10 of them, written? So did you know the full arc of the characters, or were there's like every week you just got handed a script?
Well, technically, I probably should have known more about my character than I did going into it. But we did a cold reading. We all went in and we read off. I don't know. The script was probably not finalized by the third audition, but there was definitely scripts that we sat around the table and read from. Now, I don't know if the kids that I was with that day are all the same that got cast. It might not have been the final cast at that point. Mm-hmm. Honestly, I don't remember. I think I was too much into my own head and too nervous to really pay attention to what was really going on with all the other kids around me. I knew that my character was going to be an athlete, and her name was Suzanne, and so I did know that about it. But did I know the intricacies of every episode? No, I didn't. I had no idea the scope of any of it until I actually got there and started filming. And really, I didn't even know much about the shows until we rehearsed each episode individually, like the night before, different scenes. So it's not like I had. I mean, did they send me the scripts all ahead of time? I don't remember, honestly, Dan, if they sent it or not. I don't remember getting the hard copies before I went away, but it's possible, but I don't think so.
One of the interesting little memes about the show in looking up things about it to try to contact you and some of the other child actors was that the last names were interesting because it's a show about healthy eating, and a lot of them had names, like yours was Suzanne Freestone, which is peaches. There was Leo Bartlett, like apples, Stan Lipton, like the tea, Ann Campbell, like the soup. So about half the...
Yeah, half... Yeah. I can tell you the history behind that, because the director of the show, I asked him that many years later, because I picked up on that too. And he goes, my wife and I one day, he goes, we literally opened up our kitchen cabinets, and that's how we named you. Literally, Campbell soup, he opens up the cabinet, Ann Campbell, and that's exactly how those names came to be. Literally opened up his cabinets and started coming up with names.
I want to talk about some of the episodes, because I know I went through them episode by episode with Terrence. But before we get into the episodes, let's talk about some of the other characters. Before we get into the child characters, I want to talk just a little bit about a couple of the adult characters that appeared on screen, and if you have any memory. There was Robert Y.R. Chung, who played Kim, the counselor. I believe his character was Vietnamese or Korean, was it? Mm-hmm. So do you have any memories about him?
Yeah, he was in. I know Lost in the Woods was one of the episodes that he was in. He played one of the camp counselors against. I think her name was Eloise, and they were. I just remember they weren't in the show for that long. They were maybe in. I don't know if you probably know better than I do. One episode, maybe two. But I never developed any kind of real relationship with him, so I don't really know anything about him.
Okay.
But I do remember him, but I don't remember much about him.
Let's go alphabetically. Jacqueline Allen was the shorter young black girl who played the ballerina. That was her main thing. Do you have any memories about her or anecdotes?
I was thinking Jacqueline was a little bit more. She kept to herself a little bit more from my memory. I think I was kind of one that wanted to be friends with everyone and get to know everyone, and I felt like she was a little bit more standoffish. But I have to remember I was 13, and so kids are so different at that age. But back then, I remember feeling like, oh, I'd like to get to know her more. But she seemed to keep to herself more, and I think she and Emily became closer over time. I think I became closer with the boys than I did with the girls, which is.
And she and the fellow who played Tom seemed to be younger than the rest of you. Is that correct, or like a year younger?
Maybe a year, not by much though.
Because you were what, 13 when it was filmed?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And you mentioned in some emails to me that Brian Goldberg, who played Stan Lipton, was your best friend. Did you know him before the show, or just...
No, I didn't know him before, but we developed a good friendship, and he actually came out to New Jersey a handful of times to visit me. So I tried finding him. I would love to see him again or talk to him, but I haven't been able to hunt him down.
Well, anyone who I'll say this, I was going to say this at the end of the video, but any of the young actors, anyone else associated with the show wants to get in contact with you, please do. Anyway, and then there was Virgil Hayes, who played Leo Bartlett, and he was the tallest of the children. He was the big athletic black kid. Do you have any memories of him?
I just remember having a couple of parties in his room. A couple of parties that nobody was supposed to know about. I remember he was fun, and he and Tino, I guess Domingo, I think they became close that summer, from my recollection. And I think their hotel room was like at the end. It was kind of like one of those motel type places where the rooms are outdoors, so you don't. I remember just walking out of my room, going to the left, and being like, "Oh, I wonder if there's a party tonight." So, yeah, they were fun. They were fun guys.
Then there's Richard Levy, who played Tom Page, and he was the probably the youngest of the boys, the short white fellow who was a little bit overweight, and that was actually the subject of one of the episodes. We'll talk about it in a bit. He also was only in 7 of the 10 episodes. I had asked Terrence, did he actually leave because of some personal issue that you can recall, or was he written out after 7 episodes for the drama of the series or whatever?
I'm not sure how Terrence responded to that. I think it had something to do with him having to go to a private school or something, where he had to end the summer early. But don't quote me on that. What did Terrence say about him?
He didn't know. He didn't really remember the reason.
I don't think it was intentional that he was written out. They may have even had to revamp the script because he had to go. I think he had to leave for whatever reason, not because the show wanted him to leave. That's what I... don't quote me on it.
Okay.
Not 100% sure.
And then Emily Wagner played Kathy Ellers. Any memories about her?
She and I remember, I don't think we got along too well. I mean, we were 13. It was only a matter of a few months, but I don't recall. I think we started off getting along okay, and then as the summer progressed, she and Jackie got closer. Emily, I know her uncle's a famous director, and so she went on to do other roles. I think she was in ER for a little while. But aside from Brian, I really lost touch with all the kids. Maybe we kept in touch a little after the summer, but at that age, and you're back in your own school and doing your own thing, things just fade pretty quickly. I know they had talked about bringing us all back for a second season, and I was really excited about that, but then that fell through. I don't know if they just didn't get the funding or exactly what happened there, but that was disappointing. Or they said we outgrew the roles because we were at a camp and we were getting too old or something like that. So, but they had contemplated a second season because the show went over a lot bigger and better than they had anticipated. And I don't know if Terrence, if he said that one of the networks did pick it up eventually on like Saturday morning children's programming.
Yeah, come to think of it, I think I might have seen it original because in looking it up, it aired starting in the spring of 1980. And yet I do remember then seeing it played over the next 2 or 3 years through the early 80s. And I think I do remember seeing it on Saturday or Sunday mornings around noonish on a commercial network. And I probably watched the episodes at least 3-4 times, or most of them at least, over the course of a few years. So it's likely that's that. You mentioned Tasha Washington, who played Ann Campbell. What of her do you recall?
She was definitely more like motherly. Like for a 13-year-old, she definitely was a more mature, young lady. where I always thought that she seemed so much older than me. And then over the years, I remember, like, wow, she really we're the same age. So, but she kind of like kind of took care of me in a way. Like, she helped me with different things and seemed like a very nurturing type of person. So
Regarding the scripts, and because of because of the Anne Campbell character, I noticed that, for example, your character was sort of featured in a couple of episodes. Brian Goldberg's character, Virgil's character. It seemed to me the least developed character was Anne Campbell's character. The only place she really wasn't a supporting character was the episode where she and Brian Goldberg get lost in the woods.
yeah.
Was there ever a thing where 2 or 3 episodes in, people said, "Oh, this kid can handle a situation better"? Do you remember them ever rewriting a script to put one character? No.
No, I don't remember. I don't remember that at all. And honestly, I never even really picked up on that. That she never really had a lead role in any of the shows. But yeah, I guess you're right about that. She never really did. I'm not sure if they had decided that from the get go, or if they rewrote a script. I wasn't privy to that, and I don't even remember.
Yeah, because I remember that Tom Page, even though he was in only 7 episodes, he was in the one where he's being made of fun for being fat. The one where he goes home.
Yeah.
And then the third one where he's featured in it is the one where he has a crush on the Jacqueline Allen character when she's the ballerina. And so it's just interesting. He's in the least amount of shows, but he has probably the most screen time, or at least
equal. You're right. He did get a lot of screen time. Yep.
The other character, or the other actor that I actually was able to contact, but then he didn't seem to have any interest after I tried contacting him, was Tino Zoldovar, who played Domingo Ramos. Any memories about him on the show?
Domingo, I remember he was just kind of laid back and kind of goofy and fun. We had an episode together where I had to save him from drowning, and that one was kind of funny because he had to splash around in that inner tube, if you remember, where the hole was in the inner tube. And I think the water came up to our ankles, and we had to pretend that it was over our heads. So we had fun. I remember we had fun with that episode together. Yeah, he was a good kid. It was a lot of fun.
Oh, why do you think that the show, as I mentioned, I and a lot of other people online apparently found it to be a good show, an interesting show, but it seemed to have fallen somewhere into that forgotten realm.
I'm sorry, what was that last sentence?
It seems to have been forgotten by a lot of people. They couldn't remember the name of it, or people said, "Oh no, they didn't." Do you think it was just too short, only 10 episodes, and it only ran on PBS rather than a network?
Probably all of the above. I think it had a real certain specific audience that really latched onto it, and but yeah, I think there's a lot of factors. I think if it had kept going, maybe, but then with modern technology developing, it was a little antiquated, with some of the goofy songs that they played, and low budget, that may have come into play. It's definitely a low budget show.
What did you think about some of the scripts? But every script, even though a kid was going through something, diabetes or weight loss or anorexia, might have been the first show. The Jacqueline Allen character might have been the first character I can think of on any show to deal with anorexia. But there was also sort of that PSA message where, oh, now we need to eat vegetables. Did you think any of the episodes were like, okay, why are we talking about cucumbers in this episode?
Well, the one that stands out is that one where we're on the farm.
Yeah.
We're picking the vegetables, and there's that really bad song.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know that.
Vegetables are so good for you.
Oh yeah,
Try 'em.
That was cringeworthy. Now I didn't know that when we were filming it, but once it hit the network or we saw the trailers, I was like, who in their right mind would pick that song? I mean, I don't know. It must have been on something when they picked that song. But the High Feather theme, they wanted us kids to sing that originally. So we were all singing it together because they wanted us to sing it, and it was so bad. Our voices were so terrible that they said, forget it, we're going to do it in studio when we get back to New York.
Well, that's actually a pretty catchy song.
And I like the High Feather song. I do. But you probably wouldn't think it's catchy if you heard all of us kids singing it.
Yeah.
So
Let's talk about some of the other actors who weren't the kids and weren't the regulars. Each episode had some certain things. For example, when I look here, uh, uh, well, let's go with the Swifty episode. There's in the Swifty episode, and we'll talk more about the whole episode in a little bit. But there's one scene where you're racing against the kid who's picking on Tom, the chubby kid, and uh, Terrence had told me that they were professional actors too. The kids, any kid who had a speaking part was a professional actor, not really there. There's a later episode where Stan is teaching tennis to a small kid too. Did you regular kids get along with the actors who were just brought on for one episode?
I think it was fine. I don't remember there ever being any problems with that. There was a lot of kids in that camp, and they would walk by and stare at us as we were doing the scenes and stuff. And so I think they got a kick out of it when some of them were invited to be bit actors or extras
Uh-huh.
in the movie. I don't ever remember any confrontation with them. They all seemed very kind, and they were all having fun. It was a fresh air fun camp from what I remember, and I think they were there on either scholarship or grant and stuff like that. So I think they're all very appreciative kids.
There were also some scenes where you guys would go shopping in a supermarket, or scenes where I think it's in the last episode where you guys are at a senior center, or maybe it's the second to last episode. You mentioned the farming episode. There's the episode where the two kids get lost and the other kids are looking for them. Um,
Mhm.
how about some of the older folks? Were they mostly actors as you can remember, or were they like locals from Mayapack?
Well, I remember the supermarket one. There was that one lady that I think she had grayish silver hair, and I know they just asked her. I think she was a shopper in the store, and she's the one who said that she's checking for broken eggs. I don't know
Yeah,
if you
yeah, yeah,
remember
yeah.
that. And she says it so methodical, like checking for broken eggs. The poor lady, I think she was super nervous because they just plucked her and asked her if she would do it, and she agreed to, but I think she was really nervous. So she was definitely one that was just pulled from the grocery store.
Uh-huh.
The ones on the farm, my guess is that they somehow recruited them in more of a professional way because they were on location at a farmhouse, and so I'm not 100% sure about them,
Uh-huh.
but they may have been the farmers there, but I think they probably had to rehearse and stuff with them because they had more than just one line. But I don't really know. I don't think they were brought in as professional actors, but they definitely were given a little bit more scripts and stuff to follow. So, but not the grocery store lady. She just
One of the most more funny episodes is the one after Tom leaves, and your character's sort of stoner cousin comes to camp to become a counselor.
yeah.
What do you remember about the actor and the story?
I love that one because I got to scream at
Yeah.
him. Yeah, that was probably one of my favorite scenes is when I got to yell at
Yeah.
him. That was fun. That was fun.
Um, so were the episodes filmed in chronological order that you can remember, or were they just
No,
no?
nope, no. I don't even know. They definitely weren't filmed in chronological order, and we may have even done scenes from different shows in between.
Uh-huh.
Don't quote me on that. Terrence would probably know. I don't know if
Yeah.
you asked him that question, but
No.
no, I don't. From my recollection, they were not filmed in order.
Well, I would think the last few would be once Tom left because he's missing in the last like 3 episodes. Yeah.
But yeah, I know Going Home was that one was filmed without any of us, or at least I wasn't in that episode at all.
Uh-huh.
So I'm not sure about that one.
So let's go through episode by episode a little bit. Just sort of recount some of the episodes, and then any anecdotes you may have had over it. Now, the show. Do you remember it being already granted 10 episodes to run, or did you film the first one as sort of a pilot, a test?
No, I think they had the grant for all 10 from what I recall. Because
Okay.
I know we were going to be there until the end of the summer, so that was already established.
Okay.
So I would think if it was only one, they probably would have said, there's a chance we might be here longer, we might not be. But from what I recall, I remember them telling my mom that it was going to go through the summer.
Hmm.
So, yeah, so I'm pretty sure and the scripts were already complete, as far as I know, by the time we got there.
Okay. So the first show was called Deepwater Test, and I guess the featured character was Tino Zaldivar's character, Domingo. This is the kids getting to know each other, and it's the only one of the 10 episodes, I believe, that doesn't have the high feather opening. You see the buses pulling in and the people getting called, and the girls go to their their bunkhouse, or whatever you call it, and the boys go to their bunkhouse. Was that film? How soon was it? Say from when you actually arrived there as a normal person to when you began filming? Did you start filming the next day, or
Oh God, that's 30 years ago.
40?
I don't remember, but I would imagine because their time is money that they probably went into the episodes pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
I think they did break into the theme though right after they did the whole going into the bunks and all that. Didn't they? Or did they add that?
I don't recall. It's been a couple of months since I watched or
yeah, I think they did, but I mean, don't quote me on that. But
and in that episode, I guess the lesson learned is to be honest, because Domingo is trying to impress the other kids or whatnot. The interesting thing,
backfired.
Yeah, the interesting thing is the show could be corny at times, but on the other hand, I think it had a bit of realism. Maybe because the kids were age appropriate, and it didn't have that sort of Brady Bunch saccharine-ness to it. It was anything that you remember from that particular episode? Any anecdote in the filming of it, or with any of the kids?
Just like I had mentioned about the water being only up to the ankles and mucky and murky, and you're kind of sinking in the water, but there wasn't much water. So I do remember that being funny. That's the biggest thing that I remember about that episode, and kind of buggy.
Yeah.
So Domingo, Tina, and I kind of got a kick out of that. Like, oh, here we go. We got to do another take on this with the nasty water and the inner tube that looked like it was deflating, but it really wasn't deflating. It was just kind of funny.
The second episode is called Stan's Secret, and that featured Brian Goldberg. He's a diabetic, and naturally the other boys think he's a drug addict, and they don't know what to do.
Right.
The interesting thing about that show is one of the things that I found recurring in rewatching the 10 episodes was the kids seem to not have memories of prior episodes, even an episode before, because in the first episode, Brian comes off as a nice, or Stan, the character played by Brian Goldberg, comes off as a nice, friendly kid. And then by the second episode, everyone else is treating him as sort of a smug asshole. And it's like, you wonder what happened between the first and second episodes that they went from liking this kid to not liking this kid. So obviously, they wrote him that way for that particular episode. What do you have any memories of that particular episode?
Well, I didn't know what diabetes was back then, and I don't think I was in that episode a lot. Ironically, my young son has type 1 diabetes, so I know all about it now. I think I remember him chasing that bug on the ledge. I remember standing in the background watching that being filmed, and that's my memory of that episode, and not a whole lot more.
Okay. The third episode we've mentioned, Swifty, and from what I'm looking online, for whatever reason, that seems to have been the most popular episode, the one that sticks in most people's mind, and maybe it's because it's the fat kid getting picked on and being called. It's the one where someone's actually being made named. The Swifty name is what the bully kid from the other bunkhouse calls the Tom character, and he sort of mopes around most of the episode because they're having the Camp Olympics or something like that. And what memories of that episode do you have?
Swifty's one of my fonder shows too, and I do have a lot of memories. One, there's a scene where I'm racing the kid. I think his name was Gene, either in real life or on the show, and I had on a pair of shorts that became famous with my school because it said Caldwell on there, and that's where I was from. So that was one thing. One of my very close friends from school, she had a big crush on that kid Dean. So when that episode aired, she just desperately wanted to meet him.
Did you have his phone number for her?
What's that? It never worked out. I do remember getting a lot of the kids from the camp engaged in that episode. I remember them going around and talking to a lot of the kids, asking if they'd want to be on the show. And I remember that was a really hot, those 2 days that we filmed out on that field were so hot. I remember that. And I remember the director telling me, he held up a big sign when I'd go to speak, because I had a lot of lines in that one. And he said, slow down because you talk too fast. So, and that became his theme throughout the show. And I still talk too fast. Everybody, even at work, they're like, you talk fast, you walk fast, you eat fast, you drink fast, I do everything fast. So I remember the director always holding up that sign, slow down. So I'd have to like check myself to slow my speech down. So I do remember a lot about that episode. It was a fun one to film.
It's interesting too because there were 2 or 3 websites that mentioned High Feather when I was trying to look up to contact the actors or anyone from the show, and one of them was a fellow, I guess, who was a few years younger, and he seemed to I guess you were his first celebrity crush or whatnot, and he has photos of you in that race against the Dean kid. So
Yeah.
did you ever get that in real life where guys your age or younger were like, oh, she was on a TV show? Did you ever exploit that to get the cool guy at school?
That's funny. Now, I think some of the guys in my school may have had a little crush on me because of the show, but at that age, they don't come out and tell you. Some of them are just a little bit mean. And like I said before, sometimes I would hear a guy singing behind me walking down the hallway. I'm in high feather, and all of a sudden I turn and they duck behind the locker. I remember stories like that were kind of funny.
Uh-huh. Episode 4 is called A Nose for News, and this is basically where this is actually one of my favorite episodes because this is where Stan becomes sort of the editor of the camp. Not Stan. Was it Virgil? Yeah, Leo, Virgil, the character played by
Leo,
Virgil.
yeah.
Yeah, Leo becomes the head of the editor of the camp newspaper, and the story he tries to bust is there's this Italian man who's, I guess, Italian or Hispanic maybe, who's the camp cook, and he keeps blowing up and quitting all the time, and Chef. Okay, Rios. Okay, so it was Hispanic. That actually seemed to be a pretty fun episode, and it involved, I think, all 8 kids. Eight kids, sort of evenly spaced. Do you have any memories of that one? Because that was sort of maybe the only episode that seemed to be a comedy. A comedy episode almost.
Yeah, actually, that was Stan who went to Chef Rios to learn how to cook.
Yeah.
That was Stan. So I remember spying to find out where he was going all the time, and then I discovered him in the kitchen, and that's what I remember where Chef Rios says, "Oh, I see class has doubled." I remember that line where I went in and helped cook with them, and I remember doing the cooking and stuff like that, and hanging out in the kitchen. And that was a fun one to film too. And we got to try the food afterwards and stuff. So I remember that it was hot again. We're in the kitchen cooking and like probably a 90-degree day, but aside from that was fun.
Yeah, and the revelation at the end of the show is that every week the cook quits.
Yeah.
Then show 5 I had mentioned, that's Ballerina, and that has the Jacqueline Allen character and the Tom Page character, or whatever Jacqueline Allen's character's name, and she has anorexia, and Tom clearly has a thing for her. The interesting thing is, when I spoke with Terrence, he told me how there was an episode they're supposed to kiss. Now this is 1979, so you have a little black girl and a chubby white kid, and they don't kiss on the lips, but they sort of get close and kiss because he's got the crush on her. I'm wondering, do you know if the producers got any kind of hate mail because of that? Because at that time there might have only been 2 or 3 kisses ever on American television between blacks and whites.
That's right. I never even thought about that either. And not to my knowledge. I mean, if they did get hate mail on it, nobody ever told me, or not that I remember. And to me back then, it didn't even seem like anything. It was no big deal.
Yeah.
Interesting. The adults are the ones that probably look at it differently, but as a kid, you're kind of, okay, this is what we're doing. It's no big deal. Yeah. I do remember that episode, though. I remember I wanted to be the dancer. And I was the athlete instead. But I remember thinking, I want to be the ballerina.
Well, I think you were the tallest of the girls.
I was. I did kind of hover over all of them, except for Anne. She was tall, too. But Emily Wagner and Jackie, they were definitely on the shorter side. So I remember feeling a little bit goofy and tall and wanted to be the delicate short ones, but that didn't happen. Now I'm happy I'm tall,
Yeah.
but when I was 13, I wasn't.
And the Jackie character is Leslie Reynolds, like Reynolds Rap. I just looked it up. So
Yeah, yeah.
and then we get the Lost in the Woods one, and that's the one where the two kids Stan and Anne, for some reason the whole camp is going on a hiking trip, and they go off looking, I forget now, maybe it's for a butterfly, or they see a bird watching, yeah. And then a couple of the other kids go after them, and the funny thing is they finally catch up to the house where the first two kids are, Stan and Anne, and they're eating one, and then Anne, I guess, skins her knee or her arm or whatnot. They're putting salve on it, and they make it seem like it's, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is about to happen. Do you have any memories of that episode? Because you guys were just on the hike. You guys didn't go off. You weren't one of the characters.
My memory of that, because I wasn't on location for when they actually went to that house. I was there, obviously, hiking in the woods in the beginning. I do remember filming when we were getting yelled at as a big group afterwards, and we did that. It was from what I remember, it was either really early morning before the sun came up or at night. And I remember just being exhausted, and I just did take after take, and I was like, oh, I want to go home. And I remember thinking even back then, like, even though it was part of the script, why the heck am I in trouble? I wasn't the one that took off, but they actually ended up in the script. I guess they were showing, like, hey, you have to have each other's backs and you have to be there for each other. And so we all got in trouble for that as part of the show. And I remember being a little annoyed, like, that's not right. I didn't do it. I wasn't the ringleader this time.
Before we go on to the next episode, I just wanted to ask, because the next episode is the one where the Tom character goes home, and his character has sort of the most Jekyll and Hyde kind of character arc, because in some episodes he's talking about eating healthy, and in other episodes he's pigging out on sweets. To what degree do you think that most of the characters, yourself included, or most of the actors, were like their characters? Was the character basically you, or did you have to change anything? Was your character more haughty or more standoffish or more friendly than you were at the time?
I think my character was more standoffish. I always wanted to fit in and be friends with everybody, and I think Suzanne was a little bit more high on herself than I am or was in real life. I think they portrayed her as being the more confident one of the group and more take control. And in real life, I think I was just more like, hey, look at me over here. I want to be friends with everybody, even if you don't want to be friends with me. So.
How about any of the other kids? Like you mentioned, Brian Goldberg you were close to. Was he very much like Stan?
Brian in real life was probably just very more laid back than some of the episodes that they portrayed Stan in. Just really very low key, and you get that comes across in the show too. I think to a point. He was definitely the quiet one of the bunch. Him and Tom. I don't remember Tom being too animated in real life. I think he kind of just hung back and did his thing. Jackie, Leslie, I would say she and Emily were the most, maybe the most, I don't want to say cliquey, but they definitely had stronger personalities, I think. I mean, I don't know what they're like today, but this is my 13-year-old brain talking about what I remember, and at 13 you're insecure, so you don't see things probably the way they really are.
Yeah,
you might want to add that in there so I don't get myself in trouble if they watch this.
And Tom is actually Richard Levy. That Tom is the character name, just so because people know. So let's talk about that episode, the one where he goes home, because very few of the other kids were in it. You're just in like the first 2 or 3 minutes when saying goodbye to his character. Was there any jealousy because he basically got the whole show to himself?
No, I don't remember that at all, because I think they filmed that off-site. I think they did that maybe back in New York or what have you. I don't think it was filmed at the camp. I remember when it aired on TV, I remember being like, well, wait a second, where's everybody else? There's nobody else in this show. And I remember every time it came on TV, I was like, it's this episode, because I was bummed that it wasn't the one with all of us in it. So that's what I remember of that show, but very little memory because we just weren't there. We didn't film in that one, or at least I wasn't.
The County Fair show, I think that's the one that has the song. And no.
County County Fair was my #1 favorite, and then Swifty was #2, probably because those were my bigger episodes.
But the county fair does have your character stoner cousin there, or I
Yeah.
think he's drinking. I don't think
Yeah.
he's doing weed. I think he's an alcoholic or something.
Yeah.
What was your memory of that actor? Do you remember the actor who played the cousin?
Well, I do remember him. He was only in one episode, but I do remember when we had to walk through the woods and put our arms around each other. I remember not liking that. I remember, it was awkward, and I didn't like that scene where I had to, walk in the woods holding, putting my arm around him.
Huh.
Yeah, and we, aside from just acting, we didn't really interact with each other before or after too much. But that's the one that I told you I did have fun yelling at him and sneaking around the tree and figuring out where he was going. I definitely had a lot of fun with that one. And then going on locations with that fair was a blast. I remember having a lot of fun because we got to leave the camp and we did something different. And we were amongst people that weren't, members of, that was a real fair. So I remember getting a lot of people, like, very much, you felt kind of like a mini taste of what fame would be like in that episode, because they had to block off things in order to let us film, and all the bystanders looking and saying, "What's going on? What are they doing?" And so that was like our little mini claim to fame, was County Fair, getting to watch all the people and how their curiosity. That was fun.
And I was in error. The wacky song about the vegetables is actually in the Lost in the Woods episode at the end, after the kids get rescued, so to speak. To me, the oddest episode was the 9th episode, Saved from the Pound, where there's I guess the usual story about healthy eating or whatnot, and then the kids find this. I forget which 2 kids find this dog that's dumped out on the side of a road in a bag, and they bring the puppy home, and they I guess they learn about good animal husbandry or something. That, do you have any memories of that show? Because that to me seemed to be the most odd of the episodes. It just didn't seem to fit in.
It's funny that you say that, because I don't even, that one, until you mentioned it, I forgot all about that one.
Yeah.
What was it called again, that one?
Saved from the Pound.
Yeah, you know what? That was probably the least liked, is my guess, because I don't even really remember it. You said, you thought it was the most awkward, and I don't think I was really in that one that much. So that one I have very, very little recollection of. That one and Going Home are the 2 that I don't remember much at all. And I think that may have been the one they were playing tennis on the tennis courts.
Yes, that was sort of, I guess you call the B story. That's where Stan, and there's this little New York kid who's sort of like a kid from, hey Stan, you teach me how to play tennis. So that was basically Stan, not Stan, Leo's biggest episode there.
And then they named him Scruffy, the kid, because the dog was Scruffy or something like that. Yep. And then the camp counselor, she was in that one more too, I think, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. And there was the one, and Kim the counselor was in the first one. He was in Lost in the Woods, and then I think in the last episode, Food Follies, I think the kids are trying to raise money for homeless people or something back in Kim's village in Korea or something like that, for some worthy
cause.
I like
that episode too. I had fun with that one.
Yeah, and that's where I meet the senior citizens. Now that was the last episode. Do you remember if that was the last one actually filmed?
I do think that was towards the end, because I remember us winding down doing that show. So yeah, that one definitely was towards the end. I remember going to that place and up on, going to the senior center and filming that. I remember having fun singing the songs. I still have some of them memorized from Food Follies. So that was a good one. I like that. It was colorful. The kids all seemed to be having fun in that one.
Now they must have had some other kids outside the camp, because they had some youngsters who were clearly 5 or 6 or 7 years younger than you guys. They had like 2 or 3 other little skits where they had 6 or 7-year-olds and maybe 8 or 9-year-olds, and then you guys. Do you remember that if they were actually from the camp that you were from?
I want to say they were. I think the camp had a bunch of different age ranges. They may have had day camp there where the kids came for the day. I don't think there was too many other paid actors, because they were on a budget. So they could have brought a few other kids in from the outside, but that all blends together for me now.
So, Cindy, as we wrap up, and for people who want to watch the actual show, I'll link to the Wikipedia page on High Feather, and there's also a page that has all 10 episodes. I think the page that has all the episodes, the first three are divided into three 10-minute parts, and the rest are all half-hour episodes. But um, you mentioned a couple of times that you were sort of surprised about the final episodes that when you saw them. Were there any episodes that when you were filming them and then saw the final result that you were like, boy, I didn't think that was like that? Or do you remember, were there any episodes where they changed an ending or changed something from what you actually had a script of?
Not that I recall. I mean, I'm sure they changed things up a lot, but that was all done behind the scenes. At that age, we were just, doing our lines and waiting to go back to the pool at the hotel. So I don't remember them changing up much, but I'm sure the older folks that worked on it, behind the scenes, some directors, producers, and stuff would know more about that. So, no, I don't remember them changing up too much.
Earlier, you'd also mentioned that some memories were coming back to you. Are there two or three memories that stand out that you haven't spoken of yet? Whether it's actually things that you filmed, or things behind the stage, or things that might have happened 5 or 10 years later when you were speaking with some of the producers or something, was keeping in touch.
Well, and one of the memories that I have that wasn't so fun was we had to take our clothes to the local laundromat. That wasn't a big deal. But I remember there was a Dachshund dog sitting on a chair, and I remember going to pet it, and it jumped up and it like clung to my hand. And I remember having to go, I think I got a couple stitches in my hand. And I remember one of the production assistants was yelling at the lady who had the dog, and the lady said, well, she shouldn't have pet the dog. And she said, you shouldn't have a dog in here that bites. And I remember that argument going back and forth. So that was a memory that definitely stands out. So that was one of them. Yeah, and I mean we had a lot of good memories back in those days. And it was only one summer, but it seemed like a lot longer because there was so much packed into one summer. And I remember my parents just showing up. I think it was a day that they invited the parents to come up, and I remember feeling so independent at the time that I was like, "Oh yeah, you can go home now." I was like, you don't need to be here. Like I'm good. Remember that, and uh, yeah, there's just different things that you recall. I remember we used our own wardrobe for the most part. And I remember bringing clothes up, and some of the other kids like had much nicer clothes because they came from more affluent families, and I remember feeling a little insecure with that. It's just certain things that just pop up for you. I remember the beds weren't all that comfortable in the hotel room; they were small. I remember that, but I remember feeling kind of cool that we weren't really in the camp and that we got to go back to a hotel at the end of the day. So that was, a 13-year-old mind, thinking that's kind of cool. I went back to the camp years later, and it was all overgrown. I would say this is, gosh, it was right before I got married, so maybe 1990, 91. And I remember going back and I found it, and it was wild because you could still see some of the old buildings, some of the cabins and things like that were there, but completely overgrown, like where I had to literally push the brush away to get through. And so I don't know what that land is, what they did with it now, but it was really interesting to go back all those years later and piece it together of where this was filmed and that was filmed, and that was pretty wild.
And yet, that's only probably a decade or so after you were there, and now another 3 decades have passed. So
Yeah, can't imagine what it. I mean, I bet you anything it's probably developed land,
yeah,
maybe there's houses on it. I don't even know. It would be nice if it was preserved and it was a farm or something, but I really, I don't know. I thought I was in a whole totally different country when I was filming that show. So when I went back and it was only like an hour away or two, whatever it was, I was like, really?
And was it a private camp, by the way, or was it a New York State run camp since it was
I think it
funded?
was I think they called it a fresh air fund camp, if I remember. It's that would probably be funded by the state of New York,
Okay.
or by the or a local. But I don't think it was private as far. I mean, I don't think it was like. I think it was a low budget where kids at disadvantage could go to, if I remember correctly.
And When it all ended, you said that I guess you didn't keep in touch with anyone, or did you keep in touch with Brian or Tasha? Or,
Yeah, well, Brian's the one who I said met. He came to New Jersey a handful of times.
Mhm.
He came to visit, and like I said earlier, the director and his wife,
Mhm.
and I went to go visit them a bunch of times. We wrote letters back and forth. I had a lot of letters between the two of us over the course of probably 15 years, and then the production assistants, Susan and Marianne, I kept in touch with for a few years after that, and I also became good friends with Susan's sister, Allison, who was closer to my age. So she came out to visit me. So I was definitely, as far as I remember, I think I was the only kid that really kept in touch with the adults for quite a while afterwards.
So when you look back now, all these decades later, are you sort of proud of that show, the work you did, and are you heartened by the fact that there are people like me and a lot of these other people online that just always remember this show, and uh, hopefully maybe some of them will find this interview and find something interesting to watch there. What are your thoughts now, all these years later, about the show?
I thought it was an amazing opportunity, an amazing experience, and uh, it was so much fun. I think after that, I thought I was going to go on to become someone extra special, and reality kind of hits you in the face that no, just because you do this one little show doesn't mean you're going to be famous. Probably looking back in hindsight, it's probably a really good thing that I didn't become famous, because you see how many child actors get so messed up when they do become famous, and I probably didn't have the brain to be able to handle that, back then. So it's probably positive that I went on to college instead of continuing to pursue an acting career. But I have absolutely no regrets doing the show. I had a lot of fun, and it was a big growing experience, and it was just a very unique opportunity that not everyone that I associated with back home had been given. There wasn't child actors in my school, but not a lot. So it was a blast, no regrets at all, and I hope people enjoy revisiting it. The ones who were fond of the show back in the day, I hope they see your interview and they want to go back and be like, oh yeah, I remember that show, or because we did have a good time doing it. So.
And do you find yourself looking back with nostalgia? Because as we're recording this here in the beginning of June of 2020, there's this COVID-19 pandemic. There, in the last week or two, there have been these riots because of the murder of a black man in Minneapolis by a police officer. Have you over the years, whether it's personal trauma or the bigger traumas of a pandemic and what, have you found yourself sort of looking back and saying, boy, those old days, man, they does that hold some water that you like looking back at those, and that the fact that you can look back at yourself when you were 10 or 11. I mean, some people have had home movies, but most people in the 70s don't have that record of themselves.
Right, right. I mean, I don't live in the past. I mean, like the pandemic and COVID, I look for the growth from negative things. I look for opportunity to develop as a person. It's great to look back, but I'm not the type of person that just sits there saying, "Wow, those are the good old days. I wish I could go back," because that's not reality. And reality is we are faced with all these challenges all throughout our lives, and I feel like it's what you learn from them, what you grow from them, is what's more important. I look at people who just sit in the past of the good parts of their life, and they sit there and they struggle with the yucky parts in modern day, because they have those great memories. I look at it like they were fantastic memories that I'll hold on to and always keep in my heart and my mind, but they're not what I'm living for today. Just growth opportunities is what I'm always looking for, all the time, all day long, from positive and negatives. Whether it's a pandemic or getting a raise at work, I mean, it's all part of life.
And finally, if there's anything else that I've missed or anything that was spurred on you, do you have anything that just came to mind that you just like to get out there for any people who are fans of the show? Or?
I mean, no. If there's any fans out there that watch this and they want to get in touch with me, you can feel free to give them my email.
Okay.
If they want to get in touch with me, I can't imagine there's going to be millions of people inboxing me, but there's a few people. I do have a scrapbook that I had put together
Oh.
A lot of memories, and I was going to pull it out before this interview, but I have to hunt it down. I know I have it around somewhere, but I have different pictures. They took a lot of still photos back then
Ah.
as well to make sure that the scenes were, the things were, the props and everything were in the same spots. So I do have a lot of still photos from back then. I've got even more stories written in the book. So if there's anybody that wants, to hear more, I'd be happy to share some more memories.
Well, hopefully we'll see if any of the other actors contact me, or perhaps Terrence has suggested maybe you and he in a few months down the line could do a show together. If you have any of those photos and want to scan them in and email them to me, I could link them if we do another show with you two. I could put them in the body of these interviews, or
Sure,
create a page where they can be linked.
I think I can hunt them down. I think I know
Okay.
a pretty good idea where they are. So.
Well, Cindy Carlson, Cindy O'Neill Carlson, it was a pleasure to talk to you. I feel like I know you because I think we have like a 70 email exchange or something between you, me, and Terrence there.
Yeah.
And so over the last few months, I feel like you're like an old friend. Like I should be telling you. Do you remember that time when we,
Yeah.
But it was good talking to you.
My acting name was O'Neill.
Yeah.
My real last name was Walko, Walko.
Oh.
They thought it was too complex sounding, and not High Feather, but my manager. So she was actually my sister, who did a lot more acting than I did, and they wanted her to change her last name. So she's the one who picked O'Neill, and I think it had something to do with her crush on Ryan O'Neill back in the day.
Okay, well that's an interesting little tidbit. But I will link.
That's where that came from. So
okay.
My high school friends would know me by Walko, not O'Neill.
Okay. Well, I will link to the YouTube page that has all the episodes. I'll also link to Wikipedia. And as Cindy said, anyone wanting to get in touch with her, just contact me, and I'll forward on any emails to Cindy. If there are any other actors who want to talk about their memories on the show, just let me know, because I think it was a good show that impacted obviously a number of youngsters, at least in the New York area. I don't know if it really did around the country.
It went coast to coast. Well, I'll tell you one funny story before we
go.
So I went away to college, and my college roommate Tina and I became really, really good friends. And so there was one summer that we came home, and she had a younger sister, a couple of years younger than us, and I'm still good friends with both of them. And we're sitting outside at a picnic table, and she kept staring at. This was the first time I met her, and she kept staring at me and staring at me. Now, she lived in California. She was a nanny out in California, and she came home, and she kept staring at me, and to the point of I was uncomfortable. And then she's like, and I looked at her, and she's like, "You just remind me so much of this girl in the show I used to see, and it was called High Feather, and her name was Suzanne." I go, "Well, maybe because I am her." And she was like, no way, no, And so that was really pretty cool. And to this day, that is one thing that Annette and I joke about to this day. And I'm 54, I think she's 51 or 50. And to this day, we laugh about that. How I'm the girl with the show that she loved, and she actually met me in real life and didn't know it. So that was a good story.
All right.
That was fun.
Well, it was a pleasure to speak to you, and maybe we'll be speaking again sometime in the future. So thank you, Cindy.
Sounds good, Dan. Take care. Enjoy.
Goodbye.